Hi everyone, and welcome to a free mental health webinar. So today we are doing this talk for PNE, Mind, myself from Change Talks, and then Dave, Mindset by Dave. We're going to be doing a talk on depression, anxiety, and stress, the three big ones. So who am I? So my name is Tyrer. I'm the founder of a service called Change Talks. For the last 3 years, I've been delivering preventative education throughout Lancashire and South Cumbria schools, with the key aim to reduce suicides, reduce self-harm rates, and to create a happier and healthier Lancashire.
And I'm Dave Cottrell, a mindset coach on a mission to change the face of mental health within the UK. I do this through online information and education, and I also do this through face-to-face seminars when COVID-19 allows me to.
So, and just to touch on as well, myself and Dave, we both had personal experiences of mental health. Personally, I've struggled with depression, I've struggled with anxiety, and myself and Dave throughout this talk will be very, very open about these type of things. So to start, Dave, it all starts with stress. So the way that we're going to be doing this is I'm probably not going to be doing the majority of talking. I'm going to be interviewing Dave and asking him questions about the slides that you'll see. So Dave, can you explain what stress is?
Okay, so we think of stress as kind of I've got a lot on with work right now. Okay, that's the one thing. If you ask someone if you're under a lot of stress right now, that's the thing they probably think to. They'd be like, oh, is there a lot on my plate with work? But there are actually three different types of stress. Stress is actually anything that sets your body out of its normal state. It's called homeostasis. Your body wants to be in that. And anything that sets it out of that. So random things such as an increase in temperature or being too cold. These are examples of physical stresses. Too much kind of training can become a physical stress. Being exposed to things like exhaust fumes or any sort of physical illness is a type of physical stress. Mental stress is more what we generally stereotypically considered to be stress, which is the kind of what I've got on the with work at the moment, and things about like how you're looking after the kids and all of that type of stuff. And then there's emotional stress. Emotional stress is kind of arguments and fallings out, the friction that we might all have being all stuck in the same household as each other these days and things like that, where suddenly that can be mounting up. So there's those three sort of major areas. And then there's kind of obviously different contributors towards each one of those. But the main thing to know is just like in the picture that's on that slide there, we can all carry a certain amount, and it's not like we have one arm for carrying kind of physical stress and one arm for carrying mental stress and a third arm for carrying emotional stress. It all goes to the one place. It's our body is trying to return itself to normal, and in this process, if we kind of take on too much or even too little stress, which I'll come to later, it can become a problem.
And can you explain, so how exactly has stress been impacted by the coronavirus? Because I know, there's going to be a variety of things going through people's minds, financial worries, health worries. So how exactly has it been impacted?
Yeah, absolutely. So the three sort of stages of stress are the stresses going in. So that's all those things that I've just mentioned are stresses going in. Then the second stage is how we handle that stress, the internal dialogue that we have about that stress and our ability. You get two people that are both stuck in the same traffic jam, and one of them's kind of like they're kind of agitated and the other one's kind of just there sitting chilling listening to smooth FM. That's they're both in the same stress, but they're kind of the way they think and feel about the stress is different. And then the third thing is what we do to remove stress and reduce stress, and providing these things are all in balance. That's all good. We actually do need stress. Too little stress, and it's like the mind's a bit like a muscle, right? If you understimulate a muscle, it shrinks. It realizes I'm not really needed, so it'll shrink and it won't. It'll disappear almost. Same with the mind. It's like if we don't stretch it, if we don't give it stresses, we don't give it tasks and things to think about, it just goes, okay, I'm a bit bored now. We get kind of like that whole a bit bored, can't be bothered doing anything. May even get low mood from having too little stress. And then obviously if we have too much stress and we don't cope with it, we don't have that relationship in the middle, or we don't remove it. Now, how COVID has impacted this is that the stress is going in and is like almost like if you imagine this glass being your ability to handle stress, we've already got a degree of uncertainty and a degree of not really knowing what's going on, a bit of fear maybe already in that glass. They are all forms of stress. So whereas we've got our regular day on top of that, and regular day for want of a better word, but whereas we've got that day on top of that right now, it's already going in on top of an already half full container. So as a result, people feel like they're boiling over a little bit earlier. The kind of the stress is up to its absolute rim, and they feel like it's happening earlier. But it's not happening earlier. It's just that the stresses you've got of an average day are now going on top of a baseline stress that's already there. That's how it's affected on stage 1, which is the stresses going in. In stage 2, how we feel about stress, there's about 1,000, probably even more different opinions online right now about how we should be leading our lives. There is pressure from all different angles of whether we should be staying home, we should be sending the kids back to school, we should be keeping the kids home. If you go for a walk, you're selfish, if that, this, that, and the other. And there's all of these different pressures. So a lot of times we don't even know how to feel about it. We see other people achieving certain things, like, people are out there learning a foreign language, baking banana bread, running marathons like me or yourself. And then people go, right, well, I can't do any of that. And what's wrong with me? So that's, again, impacting the stage 2. And as for stage 3, there's a lot of things that have been taken away from people. Two of my biggies have been taken away from me. One of them I knew was one of my stress coping mechanisms, which was the gym. I love the gym. And right now, I went from being at the gym 6 days a week, and now I run 3 days a week instead. And that time, that bit of me time either before or after work was great. It was a part that I knew that was one of my stress relieving tools. But the one that I didn't even realize was a stress relieving tool until it was taken away from me was listening to podcasts and having me time on my commute. You always see commuters sort of a bit of a bother, can be a bit of a stress in itself, but I listen to podcasts in the car. That's pretty much all I do. I very rarely listen. I only ever listen to the radio when I'm taking the kids to and from school. If I'm in the car on my own, podcasts. And that little bit of me time is something that I realized within about 2 or 3 weeks of this lockdown happening, that's gone. So for a lot of people, those coping mechanisms, those things that they did, hanging out with friends, going down the pub, going to the gym, playing five-a-side football, whatever it may be. Obviously we're doing this in conjunction with Preston North End, going to the footy, huge one. That was, or whether that was actually going to the match itself or going down to the pub. You had that camaraderie and you had that thing. So there's some of the, again, stage 3, which is the removal, some of those things have been taken away from people.
And how exactly can you cope with that? How would you advise people to deal with this? If they are having things removed from them, as you said, you can't have your podcast anymore, what would you advise people to do in its place? So
in terms of it's finding a way to scratch that same itch. So for me, I've now started listening to the podcast when I'm doing the housework. So that's a time that I'll do that. If I get out with the dog on my own, I'll listen to a podcast then. And if I go out for a longer run on my own, I'll listen to a podcast then. It's not the same, obviously, the same. I've got, for the first time in my life, I've got a full set of Audible credits, and I can't spend them fast enough. But it's finding out other things that work for you. And if it's okay, I'll come back to that when we go onto the slingshots and boomerangs slide, because I think that I'd just be answering that question twice if we did it now. But the one last thing on this before we move on, I guess, is the stress is a path to growth. We don't want to just avoid stress altogether. Right? And the same as what I said before about it being like a muscle. We don't want to underwork it, because if you, let's just say, you've got a winger, and that winger's, used to running up and down the wing. I don't even know how many times you do it in a match. Let's just say it's 30 times a match or something like that, right? And then one day he goes, right, you know what? I'm a bit knackered today. I'm just going to run 20 times. I'm going to run the wing for 20 plays. And then that feels all right because they're tailing back. But then what happens is their fitness adjusts to match those 20 sprints now. And then one day it'll be like, oh, those 20 sprints might feel too hard. So I'll knock it back to 15 and then back to 10 and back to 5 and so on and so forth. And now the same thing happens with our mental health. It's like if we constantly just remove the stresses going in, like let's say we reduce our work week down by, from a 5-day to a 4-day, eventually the 4-day becomes the problem. If we reduce it down from a 4-day to a 2-day, eventually the 2-day becomes a problem. And then, it can be a very quick way for a person to kind of almost talk themselves into feeling kind of ineffective. And that really fits into the whole, that how we feel about stress side of things, because when we think of ourselves and we look at ourselves and go, I used to be able to do 5 days a week, and now look at me. I used to be able to be down that wing in 40 seconds. And now look at me. It's like, we don't like comparing ourselves to that side of things. So the idea, oh yeah, obviously as we get older and stuff, we get a little bit slower and things like that. But then this is like by us, this is by us kind of actively engaging with these things. We can actually, by not just choosing to avoid stress, but actually looking at how we cope with stress as the outcome, then we can actually keep ourselves, a bit more active, whether that's physically or mentally for longer.
And I think what this ties in nicely into the slingshots and boomerang slides. I think if you're watching this, just pause for a second and think, when you are stressed, what are you doing to cope with that? So if you've had a really bad day in work, if you're struggling with the current situation, are you turning to drinking a few can of Fosters? What is your coping mechanism? And I think this ties in nicely for Dave to explain exactly what slingshot and boomerangs are. And you can actually see a boomerang in the corner of his room.
You can't, because it's off the corner on the. But I'll hold this. I'll hold this one up on where you get a little bit more of the zoom than we do on the actual recording. So slingshots and boomerangs, two different types of behaviours. I'll start with boomerangs, and this is one of the things that I would definitely advise against right now, is the idea of swapping what might have been a healthy coping mechanism before for an unhealthy coping mechanism. If we look, I work with people on behaviour change quite a lot. And if we look at people who say give up smoking, there's this common thing that, a person who gives up smoking puts on quite a lot of weight. And, that isn't down to the fact that smoking is the world's greatest diet tool. It's usually down to the fact that smoking was a stress coping response. So that person got to a certain level of stress and lit up a cigarette, and that was the response. Oftentimes what will happen is, because that smoking gave that person an immediate response straight away, they will look for something else that gives them an immediate response. And food is quite frankly one of the things on this planet that actually does the same thing. Alcohol does the same thing. Drugs do the same thing. They all give you an immediate response. And this is why people fall into them. I don't judge people for any of their behaviors, because it's so easy to fall into these things, because we are a species that just loves instant gratification. It's like you go to Tesco's and all the self-service tills are out of action, or they've got queues before them and you can't get in and out as fast as you want to, or you go to a petrol station, you can't pay at pump anymore. Imagine having to wait on Netflix for your DVD to get delivered now, rather than kind of being able to instantly click and just watch whatever you want. We're not conditioned for that anymore. So we're conditioned for this instant gratification. And a boomerang is basically a behavior that gives you an instant gratification, which is the boomerang sort of going forward, only to then come whipping back and probably hit you in the face. It gives you a positive in the short term, and this is an important thing to focus on, because the actual positive itself is an itch that needs scratching. And if we want to look at changing that behavior, the first thing we want to really do is identify that positive. What am I trying to achieve here? And then look at alternatives. So we have awareness around what you're trying to achieve. Then we look at alternatives. How else can I achieve this same thing? If it's stress relief, and I know working through Preston North End, we're likely to get quite a high male audience here. But look at things like watching a bit of stand-up comedy, or look at things like having a bath. It's not just for the girls, I like to put a face mask on from time to time. I'd put it on right now, but it's green and it'd probably go with my green screen and my whole face would disappear. But look at alternatives. And that, if we look at, again, if seeing your mates at the footy was one of the things that you did, it's like, right, okay, well, this connection is one of the things there. You've got, if you're a season ticket holder, chances are you've been sat around the same sort of same person to your left, same person to your right, same people in front of you, same people behind you for years, and you've got a bit of a connection with them, and that connection is now severed because you're not in that seat. It's like let's look at this. How else can you find that connection? Could you get them on a Zoom chat? Could you kind of just get them in a group chat on WhatsApp or whatever? And we look at how else can we get that connection. If it is stress relief, it's like, how else could we get that stress relief? And we want to be looking at this with behaviors that do us more good in the long term, as opposed to give us this instant gratification but cause us more pain. So if we look at the boomerang, let's say you use alcohol, for example. The boomerang goes forward, you have the drink, you're like, But what happens is we tend to then go on to 3 or 4 or 5 of those, sleep badly, wake up the next day with a hangover. Again, that's pouring more into here and expecting there to be room for more stress. You're going to wake up feeling more stressed than you actually normally do. So as a result, the next day it's going to be easier to fill up and get to that point. And as a result, you end up reaching for the boomerang again. You keep on going back to it, even though it takes you further and further back. Now, the opposite to this is a slingshot. A slingshot, you pull it back, you put it under tension, and then you let it fly forward. You have to put the effort in first. You don't get an instant gratification with a slingshot. This could be phoning a friend. Phoning a friend can actually feel like one of the most intimidating things in the world. It can. If you're not used to it, it can feel really intimidating. But once you've actually phoned that friend and you get over that first sort of awkward minute or so, you end up having a great chat and you end up really enjoying the fact that you did. Same with like making yourself like a nice healthy meal. It can be such a faff to do it in the first instance. I've got to go to the shop, I've got to get the ingredients, I've got to do all this, and I could just phone Domino's and that'll be here in no time. But again, afterwards, you're always like, really glad I did that. I'm glad I made the effort to do that. You kind of feel healthier. You feel slightly more virtuous. Getting a good night's sleep can seem like the most difficult thing to do in the world. Getting to bed early, coming off the phone and kind of just, winding down for an hour before you go to bed, reading a book, something like that. All these things, they don't give you that instant gratification. The reward comes later. Same as, in football, the training itself, the training's not for the training, is it? It's like the training session might go like not so great, but you're pushing harder so that when you get to the match, things are a little bit easier and you turn up and, the match itself, you're a little bit more prepared for. And that's the idea of training. It's, you're not just training for the reward of the actual training session itself, you're training for the reward of what comes later. And, it'd be so great if I teach this to kids an awful lot. It'd be so great if it was something that we just grew out of, but it's not. Most adults that I work with have got these boomerangs in there, and we're all trying to achieve something good. When it's not because anyone's particularly weak, it's just that someone's fallen into the habit of getting this sort of instant gratification, and we need to just flip that around a bit.
Is there anything else you want to touch on that slide, Dave, before we move on to the depression? Or
yeah, I'll just quickly touch on the takeout menu. And it says here, takeout menu, not to-do list. I like to get everyone to write down a list of everything that could fill that need. So if it is connection, what are other ways you could connect with your friends? Let's go with stress relief, because that's what we're talking about here. If it's stress relief, what else could you write? Now, I love to get people to just write as big a list as possible, because how we look at this list is important. Now, I was only talking to my wife about this morning. My wife she grew up in Latvia, so she'd never heard the expression "curiosity killed the cat." I was trying to explain to her what it meant, but often, so many of us in England, we've been brought up on this expression to kind of stop us from going and putting our fingers in plug sockets or talking to strangers or whatever it might be. And we keep hold of it, and we don't try new things as adults. This is a bit of an issue. We kind of go, I don't like that. I don't like this guy on the internet's talking about putting a face mask on. I don't like that. This guy on the internet's talking about watching stand-up comedy. Not into that. It's like, and we say that, and we've never even tried it. I think about my kids when they say they don't like vegetables, they've never tasted them. Like, no, you've never tried it. It's like, it's not that you don't like it, it's just that you've never tried it. And I think because we've been brought up on curiosity killed the cat, we've forgotten how to be curious. We've forgotten how to just try something new. And as a result, we shy away from it, and we think, oh, well, I don't know the answer really. And if I don't know the answer, well, what could it possibly be? We'll just put a few things down there. Maybe it could be playing FIFA online with your mates, like that. That could be a way to sort of scratch that football itch and also get yourself a headset on. I don't care if you're like 56, it's like pop a headset on and have a chat to your mates on PlayStation Network and connect that way. Hopefully we're getting football back like next week. So, that might be coming back. But the idea of it calling it a takeout menu is that when we look at a takeout menu, when we look at a to-do list, we think I've got to do all of that before the job's done, right? And we don't want that to be the case when it comes to your self-care. So if you look at that list and go, oh, I've got to have a bath and watch The Notebook, have a bit of a cry, open up to one of my mates, ring the Samaritans and do all of this stuff. I've got to do all of that before I get to feel good again. We won't do it. It becomes a stress in itself. Whereas with a takeout menu, we look at the takeout menu and, it's very rare for us to look at it and there be 500 different items on this takeout menu and go, right, I need to do the lot before I've had my dinner. It's like, we just go, right, I'm going to have a sweet and sour chicken. I'm going to have a king prawn and Cantonese sauce, side of fried rice, and maybe some prawn crackers. And you put a little combo together, you order it, and you go. And that's how I want people to look at their self-care. That one person's self-care might be like, yeah, I'm going to have a bath. I'm going to take a book in there with me. Other people might hate that. some people might like meditating. Some people might like watching old like highlight reels of their favorite team. Whatever it might be, like that, whatever those things are. And if you want to sit down with your feet up in your slippers and have a cup of tea with a couple of biscuits whilst you're watching that highlight reel, that's a nice little combo. And that's why we have that list, but we so that we're aware. And then in that moment when your brain's like, oh, I'm really stressed out now, what do I do? Because when we've got that split second decision to make, our brain goes for the easy option, and the easy option is the one we've done the most. And if the one we've done the most is reaching for a drink, or even just a YouTube binge, or going through social media and like reading everything on Twitter and getting annoyed at the state of the world, if those are your things that give you your instant gratification and they're not helpful to you, it's a great idea to replace them with something else.
So I think to take from that, it's reflecting on what you're currently doing for your sort of coping strategies, and try and introduce new things. Try new things. Don't be afraid to do so. Myself and Dave, we're doing numerous slingshots when we've gone through our personal difficult times. However, now we do have we've introduced a lot more boomerangs into our lives, a lot more slingshots into our lives, haven't we, Dave?
Yeah, so, totally.
Dave's mentioned the majority of them. For me, it's exercise, reading, podcasts, audiobooks, having a bath. All these type of things are what I do. So moving on from this onto depression, Dave. Now, the first thing I do want to say on this slide, as I know that this is being pushed to a football club, as we said, there's going to be many males watching this. Just don't be afraid to talk and open up about how you feel. And I think it's really important to emphasise on this point before we do go into a bit more depth about depression. I didn't talk when I went through it all. Dave hid his struggles for years upon years. And as a man, it can be extremely challenging. And I know that from personal experience, I thought in my mind that it was weak. That I'm not a man if I admit that I'm struggling, but there is a lot of strength in showing vulnerability. So if you are watching this, you may know of someone that is struggling, you may be struggling, you may have heard about a suicide, because I do know at Preston they have lost some fans to suicide not too long ago. So please don't be afraid to reach out for support. You can reach out to Preston North End. They do offer support now. You can reach out to ourselves. So please, if you are struggling, then do reach out. So, Dave, just to start on this, could you just explain what depression is to people?
Okay, so depression is a prolonged period of sort of intense sadness. It's not, to call it sadness doesn't quite do it justice, but it's usually, in fact, almost always combined with a loss of kind of joy in things that used to give you joy as well. Almost always, not always. It can, for a lot of people, just be a general feeling of emptiness that sometimes comes with it. But more often than not, it's the seeming endless inability to see joy in things. It doesn't mean a person can't enjoy things. It just means that they're much less likely to. And the reason I like to put this straight after the talk on slingshots and boomerangs is the fact that, well, we've both seen it and we've both lived through it, where too many boomerangs in your life, they tend to lead you more and more to what I call the left. So I call the right being, and I know this will actually be other way around. It's mirrored on the screen. So that's I'll mirror it so that the people, there's the right and there's the left. Okay. So
don't do it when you're driving after.
I'm not going anywhere today. Isolating. But basically, so the boomerang takes you forward only to leave you further back. It's very rare that we do the boomerang and we end up just catching the boomerang and staying exactly where we are. And the thing about boomerangs is we tend to kind of go one up every single time. So let's say your boomerang is gambling. It starts off with like putting a tenner on the Grand National, or just a tenner on the football or whatever. And let's say you lose with that. Instead of going, okay, that gambling didn't work out, it gives a person a certain excitement, and it gives a person a certain amount of escapism. If you're kind of feeling like you want excitement and escapism in your life, you might reach out for that. And as a result, you place the bet, takes you forward, then takes you further back. Takes you a little bit further back because you've lost, and sometimes even if you win, you start going and craving that feeling, that sort of adrenaline rush. So you bet a little bit more because, it felt good doing the last one. So if I go a little bit more, the excitement's going to be a bit bigger. And the thing is, the more we do this, the more we increase the risk of getting ourselves in debt. Now, Usually at that point, if you get yourself into a little bit of debt now, suddenly you become secretive. If you're in a relationship, you're going to start being fearful of being caught out. You don't want the bank statement to be looked at, so you think, okay, I've got to make up for this. So you invest a bit more, and then you end up even further back, if potentially with the loss. Now, obviously, with gambling, there's ways in which some people come out of it in an okay situation, but for the vast majority of people, there's that expression, isn't there? The house always wins. But the biggie, I would say, that men are more susceptible to is isolation. So let's say you get into that point where you're really struggling, and then you kind of think, I can't be bothered going to this party tonight. Can't be bothered going to see my mates tonight. So you let the boomerang go forward, which is you cancel the plans. You let yourself off the hook. The boomerang goes forward because you're like, that feels good. Next time round I might actually cancel that a few days earlier. But then next time round, you're less likely to want to actually go to that party. So you cancel a few days earlier and you let yourself feel good for a few days. And then eventually you keep on doing that. The invites stop coming. But you've still got your group chat. You're still chatting to people. But you go into the group chat one day. There's 47 messages on there. And imagine when we're all down the pub, if we come back from the toilet, you've been missing in the toilet for 10 minutes, really long way. And you come back and the conversation's moved on and you're like, right, guys, tell me everything you talked about whilst I was in the loo. We wouldn't do it. We just get back into the conversation where it is. But in the group chat, when we see 47 unread messages or some ridiculous number like that, we just go, especially if you're feeling vulnerable. Can't be bothered catching up with that. So you leave it. And then you think, the longer you leave it, the more the number goes up. The more the number goes up, the less you're likely to engage. And eventually, you stop replying entirely. Then, you're feeling you're more this way. And now you feel, I don't really feel like I can reach out to my friends one-to-one. I'm really struggling. So you start avoiding those conversations. Next thing you know, you're on your own. You've got no one to turn to. And maybe it's because all along you didn't want your friends to find out about what you were going through. You may be scared. Maybe you're a little bit embarrassed thanks to the wonderful thing called the stigma. And as a result, you just keep it to yourself. Don't want to let anyone down. I don't want to let anyone down. I don't want anyone to know how weak I am. These are the type of things we say as guys. So we keep it to ourselves. We avoid the social situation. We avoid the text messages. And eventually, it's like, right, the problem's got bigger and your coping strategies got smaller. And that's how we end up. We end up in depression. Me personally, I ended up there because I started off by using food as my boomerang. Food didn't cut it anymore, so I started using alcohol as my boomerang. Alcohol didn't cut it anymore, so I started using drugs as my boomerang. Thankfully, I never picked up a full addiction to drugs, and I only did drugs when I was going out. But at home, my new boomerang became self-harm. I would hurt myself. And each one of these things took me a little bit forward, but further back. A little bit forward, further back. A little bit forward, further back. I was up in the ante every single time, increasing the bet, increasing the risk. And as a result, I ended up isolated, alone, having tried what I seemed to be every situation, and I became suicidal. And this was 11 years ago. This is one of the big reasons I do what I do. And so that's I suppose why I talk about this in terms of the scale.
And just to touch as well, having you explained that, I was that person that started to sort of say that why I didn't want to go to a social gathering. I started to tell lies, about things. And the more that you start to do it, the more that your friends obviously start not bothering inviting you anymore. Now, if you are that friend and you see one of your friends withdrawing, possibly making up things to not come somewhere, please ask them if they're okay. But there's something called the Ask Twice campaign. And it basically means don't just ask once, you need to ask them again. Because if I ask Dave if he's okay, if he's not, his immediate reaction will probably be,
I'm fine.
Yeah, okay, I'm fine. But then if I actually went, no, Dave, are you okay? Is there anything that you want to talk about? It's encouraging them to be able to open up to you. So please do ask twice. And when we can go back face to face, especially, ask them face to face, put your hand on the shoulder and try to encourage them to talk to you. Because, I lost a lot of friends through this, and that made everything a lot worse because it felt at the time that none of them cared at all. So please do, ask them twice. Just make sure they're okay. Don't be angry at them because you just don't know what's going through their minds.
Yeah, absolutely. And the next sort of phase of this is we look at the slides again. It says feeling like your head's underwater. Now, as I said before, with a lot of time with depression is we can stop getting the joy from things that we got before. And the way I like to describe this, if you look at the image that's on the screen, that's a little cartoon of me. I'm stood on a box of self-care, and now in the first picture, I'm in the shallow end of the pool, and as a result, the water's only up to here. My head's above the water, I can breathe. The self-care I'm doing, the stuff we talked about before, watching comedy, watching the footy, that kind of stuff, that's keeping my head above the water because life's kind of okay. Now, when we're in depression, usually it means life's kind of chipped away at us over time and we end up in deeper water. And as a result, that same box of self-care doesn't matter if I'm in the deep end, my head's going to be underwater. And when that happens, let's say the gym is your thing and you suddenly stop finding any joy in it. And unfortunately, this is a lot more common for guys that I've worked with than it is for girls. Girls tend to still kind of just keep on trying the things like, look, they'll still go and talk to their friends or they'll still go to the class that they like at the gym. But guys, we tend to go, well, this ain't working anymore. What's the point? Like, I opened up to me mates, didn't help. What's the point? I went to the gym, didn't help. What's the point? And this all gets a little bit like trying to save money. It's like we stop putting money into the bank account if it's not making the balance go up like by a significant enough amount. And it's like, well, we all know that actually if you keep on putting away even a little amount over time, it will add up to something. But we don't see that. It becomes a slingshot in itself. We don't see the result of that. If we keep chipping away at the football training, those little drills, we'll get better at those skills, and as a result, we'll be better out on the pitch. If we keep on kind of like practicing a guitar and chipping away, eventually we'll be able to play that song that we've been chasing. And the same is true with this, is that if we keep on chipping away and doing little things to actually make ourselves feel better, even if we don't feel like they're making us feel better in that instance, we might not immediately get out of depression because there might be more at play, but ultimately we increase our chances. Now, the thing is, when we kick up, the whole expression of throw the baby out with the bathwater, this isn't working, let's just get rid of it. When we get rid of that self-care, we reduce our chances of actually feeling any better. In fact, we increase our chances of feeling even more vulnerable, of feeling even more kind of depressed, feeling even worse. And it's important to kind of know that the expression that's on there says 1% is greater than 0%. If something you do makes you feel even marginally better, then it's worth sticking with it. It's worth keeping at it because I've been in the darkest bit of depression, and you know what? Like, on reflection, feeling 1% better is way, way better than not feeling any better at all. But the thing is, once you get to that point, you're going to be kind of subject to something called Beck's triad. And Beck's triad is like three lies that we believe. And it says there on the screen, self, world, and future. These are the three lies. The first lie is, I'm a terrible person. When I was suicidal, I genuinely thought my kids would be better off without me. I've got two kids who are now 15 and 13. When I wanted to take my own life, they were 4 and 2. They've had a dad for another 11 years thanks to me not giving into that lie. But I genuinely thought I was the worst person on the face of this planet. No one could tell me otherwise. In fact, even if someone told me, oh, you're really good, I wouldn't be able to believe it. Second one is the world. The world is a terrible place, right? And the third one is the future. Now, the future is the one that I want you to challenge, right? And if you can take anything away from this talk, this is the one thing I would say. If you're suffering from depression, please know that it won't always be like this. It's not always going to feel like this. Now, when we tell ourselves it's always going to be like this, I often like to use the analogy of holding this glass up. Again, this glass doesn't half get brought up to analogies, doesn't it? If I hold it out, how much does it weigh? It's like probably about, 300 grams or something. It doesn't weigh much at all. But if I hold it there for 10 seconds, it's fine. If I hold it there for 10 minutes, it's going to start getting quite heavy. If I hold it there for 10 hours, this arm's going to start getting sore. And if I held it there for 10 days, I'm never using that arm again. When we think about things and we think about things as being there forever, we've got to do this forever. If you're feeling depressed and you allow yourself to believe and accept that it's always going to be like this, that thing's going to weigh 10 million times more, infinitely more, because you don't just feel like I've got to hold this weight right now. You feel like I've got to hold it forever. So if you're in that position, what I want you to please just repeat the following thing is, this too shall pass. This too shall pass. That phrase genuinely has saved my life on a number of occasions, because we can all handle anything. We're all amazingly strong people on amazingly difficult journeys. And we can all handle anything one step at a time, one moment at a time. We can't handle everything forever, but the thing is, we don't have to. We just have to handle it one moment at a time.
I think that's kind of a perfect point to move on to anxiety, Dave.
Okie dokes. Well, I do want to put one more thing, is the chipping away in the right direction, the baby steps and happy dances. And the important thing here is that doing the things that actually make you feel a little bit better. It's important to celebrate those things, because if you're in a position, the further down your mental health goes, the further up the difficulty of the things you've got to do in life goes. So you may have had, at the top end of your difficulty scale, living your entire life, looking after your job, looking after the kids, looking after the household, all the rest of it. That might have been the top end of your difficulty scale when your mental health was okay. And then if your mental health takes a dip, that goes off the charts. You can't handle all of that anymore. But what slowly happens is different things start creeping up. And it does get to the point where, for some people, brushing your teeth, having a shower, opening the curtains, these things are now at the top end of that difficulty. And the trick there is that, especially, I know we're going to have a lot of blokes watching this. Blokes are terrible for this. We beat ourselves up about the comparison of our current self to our best self. And it's like, what we need to do is think about this in terms of like a personal best. I like to refer to it in running, really, is that the first time someone goes from a couch to 5k, they celebrate every K along the way. They celebrate it like the first 1 minute run. It's like, yes, I got out and I did a minute. I've never done a minute before. I've not even been off the couch in months. And then they do it, and they get to the K, and they get up to the 5k. And if that person carries on and cracks on and does a 10k and a half marathon and a marathon, which runners tend to do, like crazy runners like my co-host up here, who is about to do 48 in a little while.
Miles, yeah.
But 180 odd you're doing in one go. Well, next year in
190 in April, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I've done 3 marathons now, and that's not quite long enough. I want to go a little bit longer. We do tend to want to do more, and then the problem comes when we achieve, and then one day we can't. And what happens? And I like to share my own story on this, because a few years back, I was training for my first marathon, and I've kind of just given away the end of it by saying I've done 3 now, really, haven't I? But I was training for my first marathon. I got up to 17.5 miles before Christmas, and I got injured, and I got sciatica, and then I came back, and when I came back from my first run, I'd gone from 17.5 miles to doing half a mile. On my first run back, I could do half a mile, and I knew in that moment I could do one of two things. I could either go, it's only half a mile. You were doing 17.5 before Christmas. You're never going to be back up to the 26.2. And as a result, I'd have gone home and cried and never ran again. I know I would, but instead, I did what I teach my clients to do. And this works. This genuinely works with depression. Is you dance it out, or you give yourself a fist bump, or you give yourself an 80s reach and grab, or you have an actual pat on the back, or at least a metaphorical, a success kid meme, whatever it is. You give yourself an immediate reward. Remember what we said before, we love instant gratification. So when you do, if you have been struggling to get out of bed for the last 5 days, and you get out of bed today, then yes, you got out of bed. And that is a huge achievement. That is a massive achievement. It's much bigger than me running a marathon. Genuinely is, because when the time I got round to running a marathon, it was just my momentum was high, So when your momentum's low and you do something like that, that is so much bigger. And the thing was, I did that. I did a full-on happy dance in the gym, got off the treadmill, full-on danced it out, and then fell on the floor and cried, but cried tears of happiness. I'm a very emotional person, and I am not even 1% ashamed about it. And what ended up happening is I got back on the treadmill the next day and I did a mile. I got back on the treadmill 2 days later after that and did 3, and then I got out on the road and did my first mile. And then, beginning of April 2019, I got around the streets of Manchester and earned wherever it is, that their medal by doing 26.2. And now, since then, I've ran twice. I've run the distance twice without there even being a race, just on my own for the sake of running that distance. And that's, that's not me showing off, because I honestly wish I could show people a video of what I was like at my worst. I wish I had one. I kind of don't, because I don't want to see it myself, but I want people to see it. I want people to go, right, this is where he was. I was, after my attempted suicide, well, before my attempted suicide, like the weeks leading up to it, my kids were tucking me in on the couch while I was crying myself to sleep in front of the TV. That's where I've come from. So that's why I talk about these things. And I don't talk about these things to show off or to say that I'm better than anybody else. I talk about these things to show that if we take the baby step and we do the happy dance, it pays off. You brush your teeth and you like, you know what? I'm proud of myself for this. And the next day you might open the curtains and be proud of yourself for that. And the next day you might make yourself some food, have a shower, get outside and get some sunshine, talk to one of your mates, feel like you can finally get back in that group chat, whatever it is, step by step by step by step, and you get back to doing well. But it's not a magic wand. It's not. You'll feel like it is. One day your head will just be above the water again and you'll feel like the weight is lifted. But it's not. It's not a magic wand. It's a step-by-step process.
And the most important thing is just to take that first step. Thinking of my own experiences when I weighed 17.5 stone, I couldn't get up a hill on a bike. I couldn't run a mile. And it was just by taking that first step, I'm now able to do the things I can today. Yeah. So just take that first step. Just to touch on, Dave, just before we move on to anxiety. So some people really like the idea, for example, of running a marathon, running a 10K. But often some people find there's a barrier and it's like stopping them from actually taking action on it.
Yeah.
Why is that, and how can somebody combat that?
Oh, taking the first step is often the hardest part because you're taking it from a position of zero momentum. So I like to talk about motivation not being a thing. Motivation's not a thing to me. It's momentum is, because motivation is this, like, it's either your best friend or your worst enemy. It's like it's there knocking at your door at 3:00 in the morning and telling you to go out, do a run, do a full day's worth of work, do a CrossFit workout, go home, make a barbecue, and then go out with the lads afterwards. And hey, that's a day when motivation turns up. Then it ghosts you for like 6 years. It's like not even like a month, 6 months, whatever. It doesn't turn up and you're like, hi, get your phone out. Hi, motivation, are you there? And it just ignores you. Instead, understand that first step is hard. That's where I start with people. It's like, because when people think it's hard, they blame themselves. It's not that you're weak. You're not weak. The journey is difficult. That's what I said before. We're all strong people on a difficult journey. We are all strong people on a difficult journey. All of us. And that's the thing, is that wherever you are on that journey is relative to you and what you've done. You will actually find that the second run's easier than the first one. And you actually, over time, you have to make, the second game of golf is easier than the first one. The second martial arts lesson is easier than the first one. Because getting over that initial inertia, going for your first, if you have played football, going for your first run before you've even warmed up, how hard can the warm-up sometimes be? And you think to yourself, doing your warm-ups, you're like, open up your hips, doing your high heels and all the rest of you, thinking, oh, if my warm-up's feeling like this, what's my match going to feel like? And then actually you get out there, and because you've warmed up and you've got over that inertia, you've got over that first step, actually it feels all right. I often find this with running. I call running a really nice sandwich on really horrible bread. It's like the middle bit I love in running, but the first mile and usually the last mile, if I don't hate the first mile, it's a good day. If I don't hate the last mile, it means I've not set my distance right. But I genuinely love the however many miles are in the middle. But the first and the last one, that's why I call it a really nice sandwich on terrible bread, because the bread is terrible and then the bit in the middle is lovely.
That's never heard you say that analogy before.
I'll still be bringing out analogies you've not heard in about 10 years, because I just forget what I've said to you.
So anxiety.
Anxiety.
Anxiety. Okay. So there's many things people are feeling anxious about in this current situation in particular. As I mentioned at the start, financial worries. Are people going to be in a job? They're nervous about getting the coronavirus, what that could potentially do to them, their relatives. So what exactly is anxiety? What are they feeling?
Yeah, so anxiety is a physiological response to events, whether real or just imagined. So thoughts, whether those thoughts are actually real or imagined. So this is where I start with the worst case scenario. If we look at this, as you said, Dan, there's lots of different types of anxiety, and to cover them all, we've gone over it in 2 separate full-hour shows before now, and still not covered them all. But this is the one. These are the types that are most common around people, is the fact that we visualize. I call it the whole Dr. Pepper thing. It's what's the worst that could happen. Is your brain, our minds are just the most amazing things in the world. They could be directed slightly better, but the things that they do all by themselves is amazing, because if you kind of think about a situation, your brain can create the worst case scenario for it like that. It's like, and then if it goes, okay, that's not quite as bad as it could be, it'll create one that's worse and one that's worse. And the thing is, you've got to think of this thing as like being a little bit like a cinema. What we watch on it impacts our emotions. So if you watch something that's full of anxiety, if you sit there and think, what's the worst that could possibly happen? Instead of like it going, what's the worst that could happen? Laissez-faire, don't really care. We actually go, seriously, what is the worst that could happen? Well, this could happen. I could get out on the pitch and I could go to like kick off and I could accidentally, back heel it, go in our own net, I'd score an own goal. We'd go 1-0 down in the first 5 seconds, and there's like 45,000 screaming fans just laughing at me. And genuinely, that's the type of thing that our brain can go to. Like this, I often joke about these things, but to be fair, a brain can go to that type of thing. If you replay things from the past that you're anxious about, if you think about that time that you asked that girl out in school and she laughed at you or whatever, those things they play on your mind and they make you feel anxious now. And that's the whole thing, is anxiety. Fear is about something that's happening right now. It's rational. Fear is rational. Anxiety is not so rational. It's about a perceived event that hasn't even happened yet, and more importantly, may not happen yet. But when we play it in our minds, it makes it feel as if it's happening right now. And that's why I like to teach people how to visualize, because this thing will run rampant on you. It'll go off in all different directions until you learn how to control it. And you can actually choose to put on something else. You can go, right, well, what's the best case scenario? What happens if this goes right? What happens if I get out there and I score that winning goal? What happens if I ask that girl out and she's, we end up like finding me soulmate and having an absolute blast? What happens if I go for that job interview and I just absolutely charming, stunning personality, and I win them all over and they love me and they offer me 30k over the asking price? Those things are going to make you feel pretty good. Now, people will be watching this going, yeah, well, you're just tricking your brain, aren't you? Yeah, you are. But so's anxiety. Now, I don't know about you, but I'd rather deliberately trick my brain towards a visualization that makes me feel happy than I would towards a visualization that makes me feel scared.
Why do you think people are afraid to do that?
People don't know that they can do it, I would say. I remember when I learned most of this stuff, like looking at it on paper, and the amount of times I just looked at it on paper, read it and went, that's never gonna happen, that's never gonna work. But I'm thankfully quite a curious person, like we talked earlier about curiosity. So I volunteered. Like, I was at this course I was on, I was fascinated by the mind stuff. That's how I got into all this in the first place. I was doing a nutrition degree, and the mindset of nutrition was was where I really found my entry point to all this. So while I was in this course, I was just like, well, that's never going to work. But I went into it with an open mind, and I was like, right, okay, I'll go up while everyone else was a bit shy. And I was like, I'll go up when the teacher's teaching all this stuff. And I sat there and I just got talked through how to visualize. And it's like, right, okay, imagine yourself in that room now and imagine everything going well. Like, imagine you go to the job interview, for example. I'm going to close my eyes and do this as I go. And you sat there. How would you sit? And the second he said that, find myself just sitting more upright in the thing. When we talked about this on the Mental Health Family Hour last week, I remember telling everyone to watch your body language as we went, because your body language starts to emulate it. Now imagine yourself in that same situation and everything going wrong, and you shrink down a little bit and you start talking a little bit more nervous, or maybe a bit faster to try and get through it, and the next thing you know, you mumble all your words and it just makes it worse. And we've got to learn how to do this. This is why I love teaching this when we do it in schools, because if we teach people that they can do this from an early age, it becomes something that they get good at. And as a result, they can change it. And this is why I say to it on here, the YouTube analogy. When we watch YouTube, YouTube learns what you watch a lot of. So if you watch a lot of cat videos, YouTube's going to be up next, cat videos. My kids originally started this. They started watching a lot of Marvel stuff on YouTube. And as a result, YouTube started recommending Marvel stuff to me. And when I'm looking for an excuse to not work for half an hour, I'm like, 26 characters that could beat Thanos with their bare hands. I'm into that. So I'll start watching those. And eventually, that's all I get now in my YouTube. My brother-in-law, came and stayed with us for a week, and they're from Latvia, and he watches a lot of Russian videos. He was here for a week, obviously using my YouTube. For about 3 weeks afterwards, I was having to teach my YouTube I don't want stuff in Russian anymore. It had changed the algorithm. The algorithm works off what we watch a lot. And the same thing happens in our brains, like when we watch, when we sit there and go, oh, wow, my biggest failures in life, and we sit down with popcorn and we watch it as if it's our favourite movie in the world. When we do that a lot, our brain goes, right, up next, that time that Dave was in that school in Blackpool and that girl kept on heckling him all the way through it. Do you remember that one? Actually, I think it worked out quite well. But ultimately, it'll throw up all these kind of anxiety-ridden memories, for me, it might throw up being bullied in high school or whatever it might be. And what I have to do when those situations come in, right, there's two stages to this. First of all, it's what if it goes right? Now, I'll go into that best case scenario. And the best case scenario brings me into a much more upbeat version of myself, a much more positive, solutions-focused version of myself. And then sometimes I go back to it and say, right, if some of those realistic things, not the getting kidnapped by ninjas because I'm naked on a football pitch or whatever, not those ones, but some of the realistic things, okay, let's just say for argument's sake that does happen. What am I going to do? And now I'm in a situation where I feel positive from doing the positive visualization. I feel like a problem solver, and I actually answer the question. I go, well, actually, if I get into the job interview and one of the questions is, tell me a funny story from your life, because sometimes job interviewers throw those type of questions in just to kind of see if you've done anything other than just prepare for the actual job itself. Well, I'm going to talk about this. If they say tell us a joke, I'm going to have this joke in the back. I'm going to prepare for this like this. If the girl says she doesn't want to go out on a date with me, what am I going to do? Okay, well, I'm actually going to just go, all right, cool. I'm going to walk away. If I'm out on the golf course and my first shot doesn't go to plan, what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to reassess, take a breath, go back to my technique, go back to my training. If I miss the penalty, what am I going to do? Okay, I'm going to do this. This is how I'm going to make up for it. And those are valid questions. But the thing is, our brain doesn't go there initially. It goes, what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to mess it up. I'm going to, And you know what can actually happen? And I like to use penalties as an example of this. There's an expression from Kung Fu Panda. They probably stole it from ancient Chinese philosophy. But the expression is, often we meet our destiny on the path we choose to avoid it. If you sit there going, what if I miss? That's all you're thinking about when you're running up to take a shot. You may you in your head, you're unconsciously pushing that ball to the side. You're missing. You're firing it straight to the keeper's hands, or more to the point. And this very rarely actually happens, but it happens in terms of people say applying for a job, or it happens in people going for that first run, like you were saying before. What if I miss? What if I fail? The person runs straight past the ball instead of taking the shot. Now we know in football that person's not getting a goal. But they don't get the goal by not taking the shot. There's that old cliche, we miss 100% of the shots we don't take. And this is the whole thing, is that we actually need to go, right, well, what if I succeed? And ask that question. What does that look like? What does that feel like? And that makes us feel powerful, makes us feel confident. And when we feel powerful and feel confident, we take a more accurate, more powerful shot. And as a result, we increase the chances of it going in.
And do you feel that some people feel that they don't deserve to feel this positive? Do you ever think that certain individuals could potentially visualize things to be going well, they feel really good, and then they notice that they feel really good and they think, oh, this isn't normal for me, so they start thinking, I don't deserve to feel like this, I shouldn't be feeling like this?
It does happen. There are elements of self-sabotage. It'd take us another whole hour to get into that, probably. So the beliefs topic we talked about last week would be more along those lines. But I would say more often than not, actually, that'd be something the person would dwell on later. Like while they're in that moment of success, what tends to happen is something comes out of that person that they never knew they had before, and it's quite intoxicating while you're in it. It might be something that later on the person goes, oh, I don't know if I deserve that, or what was that all about, and who was that out there. But usually during the actual moment, most people I know, they kind of get a little bit, they roll with it. It's really exciting, especially when someone's never experienced that before. That's one of my favorite parts of my job, which is why I have a good chuckle whenever I watch people's body language while they're doing it, because you just see the person come alive.
We won't go in depth with that then, because I could continue asking questions about this, because I'm quite interested in it myself.
Yeah, well, you and I can talk about that afterwards.
I'm really interested in it, to be honest. So I'm feeling anxious, okay? I'm getting really worked up. My anxiety's gone to 9 out of 10. What is a quick trick, Dave, for someone to reduce their anxiety?
Yeah, I'm going to hope that since I've moved my office around, I've actually still got the space to do this. So I'm just going to roll my chair off to the side. And I'm gonna take my headphones off. You'll be able to still hear me.
Yep.
And in fact, if I move my camera, I think to there, that's going to increase my chances of being able to do this.
Oh, your lovely flowery shorts then as well.
I can't hear you. So, I've got my shorts, right? So, anxiety relies very much on the thought patterns and very much on ourselves telling ourselves stories. And the language centre of our brain and the movement centre of our brain can't work so well at the same time. So you may have actually found that getting out and playing a game of footy, brilliant for your anxiety, really kind of lowers it down whilst you're out there and moving, especially when you're kind of in flow and you're in the zone. If you then start wandering away with your anxiety while you're out on the pitch, you'll probably find that you start missing shots, you start forgetting what you're doing. And if you need to kind of bring yourself back to being mindful of your movement. This is a little trick where you use mindful movements to actually create that situation. So if your anxiety is not a 10 out of 10, that's a panic attack. We're in completely different territory. But if you're at sort of 9 out of 10 or below, what I want you to do is try out this juggling ball trick. And I'll just lower this down a little bit more so you can see what my hands are doing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a pendulum with my hands like that, okay? The hand that's not got the ball, like this one here, stays still. The hand that's got the ball wants to take a really big sweep. Now, I can talk, nearly threw out actually then. I can talk and do this at the same time because I've done this hundreds of times in demonstrations. But the first few times I did this, I was like, and I couldn't even do it, let alone talk. And you want to make them nice and smooth, big pendulums like Newton's cradle. What's going to happen as you do that is the anxiety is going to start to come down. Then what you do is you allow yourself to get anxious again. So you think about the thing that was making you anxious. That's going to take the anxiety back up, but probably not to a 9 out of 10. And then off you go again. Taking it through that motion, letting the anxiety come down, bringing it down, just focusing on the movement. It'll interrupt your thoughts and slow down the anxiety. And then you're going to keep on doing that. Now, I don't know how many times. It differs from person to person. I've seen people get it in 2. I've seen people where it takes 7. I've seen everything in between. But what will happen is each time you do it, your anxiety will get a little bit lower and a little bit lower. And what you'll find is when you try and make yourself anxious again, the level you can take it up to by thinking about that same thing will be lower and lower again. And eventually, like a ball, it'll just bounce, 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 and then it'll stop. And you can take a person to absolutely zero anxiety on that. You can take a person to like being able to think about the thing, maybe even talk about the thing that was making them anxious, and no anxiety. It's again something that should be taught in schools. If considering we're speaking to a football audience, trying to do similar things with footwork, like really focusing on some nice, smooth, slow motions with your feet, with your footwork, doing some like smooth cone drills. Probably do the same thing because it works on the principle of mindful movement. Going to the gym, when you first do it, or when you first do yoga or something like that, mindful movement, you've really got to check in with what you're doing. Eventually, sometimes you can just go through the motions. You can go in the gym and just kind of sit there and be thinking and doing it. And the trick is to bring your attention back to your movement. Focus on what you're doing. Make it smooth. Control the speed. Do something with it. And while that's happening, the language part of your brain has to quieten down so that the movement part of your brain can actually perk up.
Perfect. So we have done a very whistle-stop tour on anxiety, depression, stress, and boomerangs and slingshots. So just to refer back to the boomerangs and slingshots, please do find slingshots that work for you. You know, Dave just mentioned some fantastic ones. Try meditation, physical activity, connecting with people, all these type of things. So we've only touched briefly on each individual topic there. If you do want to find out more and to watch some of our sessions in more detail, go onto YouTube and type in the Mental Health Family Hour, or search Dave on YouTube at Mindset by Dave. So additional topics that we do talk about, and we are open to doing further sessions as well. If anyone watching this is part of an organisation that wants us to do some more work, here are some of the topics that we do talk about: bullying, self-esteem, social media use, which is one that I love talking about, habit change, body image, eating disorders, mindfulness, and resilience. So we are doing a live episode tomorrow at 10 a.m. You can find that via Twitch, Dave's Twitch. So type in Mindset by Dave. Twitch, you've got links, haven't you, Dave?
Not for Twitch, actually, because this slide's a little bit old, but it's twitch.tv/Mindset by Dave. But chances are that'll have been already aired by the time people watch this. It's going up on YouTube today. But you can find out more about me and what I do by looking up Mindset by Dave on pretty much any social media. I do have a podcast, which is called Master the Mind, Master Anything. If you just want little snippets of mental health conversations, there's a good few conversations between myself and Sam on there. And yeah, if you want to add, if any of you do LinkedIn or anything like that, you want to add me on there, it's Dave Cottrell. Sam's email address. Sam's a little bit less active on social media now, and that's why it was not a slide like this for him. But it's change_talks on Twitter, and his email address has been at the bottom of this presentation the whole time. But in case that's a little bit blurry, Sam, can you just tell us what that is?
sam.tyrer@lancashire.nhs.uk. So if anyone wants to ask any questions or anyone needs to reach out for some further support, please do contact me. And if anyone wants to know any services in our local area, so the majority of people are going to be around Preston, go to an app or website called the Hub of Hope. So I'll repeat that, the Hub of Hope. So all you need to do on there is you'll type in your postcode and it'll give you access to all the local services available to you. Is there anything else you want to touch on, Dave?
No, I think we're all good. That was a whistle stop tour, and we only went 2 minutes over an hour. So,
yeah, thank you all for tuning in. If it has impacted anyone, please do reach out for support. There are services available, or you can reach out to myself and Dave. So, thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the return to football as well. So, enjoy.
Catch you all soon. Bye.